Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal peoples of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast, and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. Hi everyone, I'm Tahnee Cook and welcome to my podcast, Chuffed. Some of you may know me as the girl who got married to a stranger on TV, which thankfully worked out, and now I'm here chatting with you all on my podcast. And you're probably wondering what this podcast is about. Chuffed is your unfiltered safe space for all things love, career and life. Join me each week as we unpack relationships and dating, a dash of pop culture, and have fun conversations with cool people. In this episode, we chat with Lyndall Grace, also known as my twin, which quite a few people get us confused, but we talk about her experience on MAFS. This is part one of our chat and we discuss applying for MAFS, touching on her journey with cystic fibrosis, and get an insight into her relationship with Cam. Let's do it. Hi guys, welcome back to the Chuffed podcast. I have a very exciting guest all the way from Perth. We have Lyndall Grace.
Hi.
Woo!
My name's Lyndall Grace.
I am so excited to have Lyndall on. I popped up a question box on my Instagram. I've done it a couple times actually, and I always get Lyndall as one of the top requests and Jessie. So both Perth people, which we love.
Yeah.
Obviously, my partner's also from Perth, Ollie. Shout out.
All the best.
All the best from Perth, honestly.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of Perth people this year.
Yeah, 5 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, there's only 3 now, but at
Yeah,
the time
you
there
know.
were 5.
At the time, they've moved over. Maybe you guys will get there, hopefully.
Yeah. Oh God, we'll see. I actually am loving Sydney, and I thought I wasn't going to. Like,
You give me like...
I really thought that I was gonna like bring up all these feelings, and it was gonna be so busy,
Yeah.
and I would
Oh,
just like feel really
true.
anxious, especially after the past 2 weeks traveling have been like hectic.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm really dreading going, and then like I've actually just had the best time.
Yeah. When was the last time you were back in Sydney?
I came over in March
Yeah.
with Bronte for Mardi Gras.
Yeah, cute.
Yeah, we
love
love.
how fucking epic was Mardi Gras.
It was amazing.
Because
Yeah,
it was like,
a lot
I
of
think it
fun.
was like the World Pride because it was bigger than it has been
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And we were living right near Oxford Street, which is where all the parade is.
Right.
And it was so hectic. Like on the actual
Yeah.
like main parade night, we were like stranded on some sub. We had to like walk an hour. It was so crazy, but it was just so fun. Like it was
Yeah.
2 weeks of just like parties and I fucking loved every second of it. Ollie was like,
Hell yeah.
too much going on, but it was just fucking fabulous.
You know, it's for some, not all, but you know.
I always
have
it's
a
fun.
ball. Yeah, no, it was amazing. But I haven't been back since then, and even that was like, it was in the middle of airing, and Retreat was airing.
Oh,
And so Bronte and I remember getting a text from my mum being like, hey, I know you're with Bronte, just like maybe don't watch the episode tonight. And I was like, okay.
Retreat was rough for Bronte. We'll have
Yeah.
to get into that. But that Retreat is always when they kick
my
off the
God.
drama.
I literally remember being in the car on the way there and all of us being like, but surely there's not that much to unpack. Like we've really dealt with
We're all
everything.
good. Nah.
Oh my God, no.
If there's not, something will be started. It's just always.
Oh God.
But let's take it back. And I've done this with Alyssa and with Mel.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your first impressions of going into the Hens Night. Because obviously it's crazy being thrown into, okay, I'm going on fucking MAFS. What? Like,
you and Mel being like, am I going to get murdered? I was like, that's exactly what I was thinking.
I just, going back to that night or like when you found out, like what was your thought process? Yeah, when you kind of were like, fuck, I'm going now to film the Hens of MAFS. What the hell's going on? What were you thinking? And then what was your impressions of everyone? Because you were first. You were the
was,
first
yeah.
person in, which I was like, as long as I'm not first, I'll be fine.
Oh my God. Okay. That's exactly what I said. They were like, what is the worst thing that could happen tonight? And I was like, the worst thing is that I get there first
Yeah.
because then I have to sit there with my own thoughts.
Yep.
And then I get there and obviously you see me just like,
Shuffling around.
yeah. And I'm like, oh, I want to see. Oh no, I don't want to wiggle out. Like I had no idea what I was doing.
I loved it.
I was nervous, but I was mostly excited.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if they did this with you, but with me, they were like, how do you normally get along with girls? And I
Yeah.
was like, usually pretty good. I just tend to do my own thing and,
Yeah.
and then, you know, make friends that way. But
Yeah.
I'm pretty oblivious if people don't like reciprocate.
Totally.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
like meeting people for the first time, I'm just like, people.
Yeah.
So I was just excited.
Yeah.
And then I got there and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, I can hear someone coming up the stairs. But they're taking ages because I've got to do it like
You gotta
6
do it like
times.
5 times.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Hens for me was, I was in some ways glad I was first because it
Yeah.
meant that I got to like properly meet everyone.
Totally.
And like say hi and all of that. I had a good time. I
Yeah.
didn't like, I don't think I had a single negative experience. I think there was one point where I was stuck between Bronte and Claire talking at each other about astrology, and I was sitting there like, I don't know anything about this.
Because I love to dabble in it, but I really don't know what the fuck anything is about.
Oh my God, I know.
Okay, this is cool.
I know absolutely nothing about it. And like, just because of like being friends with them or like being friends with other people that are interested in it, that's the only way I know anything. So I don't know anything about my star sign, but I know everything about Scorpios. I'm Aquarius.
Oh, see, I like Aquarius women, Aquarius men.
Same.
Isn't it crazy? But isn't it crazy how there's like associations with a star sign and what personality you have? Because like Ollie's a Scorpio man.
Yeah.
And like I didn't know what the stereotype was. And now that I've dated him, I'm like, okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, Bronte's a Scorpio woman.
Exactly.
And I'm like, well, look, if there was ever a perfect example, she is it.
Yeah, totally. God, I love Bronte. I miss Bronte.
I know. Poor love.
So, I feel like the night it went by so quick, but not at the same time. It was weird because we were there for so long, but I feel like it was just like, oh, okay, we're doing this, we're talking, we're doing boxes, we're doing this. And it was like you couldn't really soak in the fact that you were going on like a TV show. Like it didn't feel fully real. Like it did, but it was like...
I just remember being there and like within 5 minutes of like people arriving and talking, like forgetting that the cameras were there.
Totally.
But it wasn't. It was when Alessandra and Mel walked in, and I was like
screaming.
And all of us were like, oh my God, what do we do? Oh God, I remember getting cut off the wines when they came in. They were like, that's enough for you.
You were there first. Like, it's so unfair. I'm like, you're expected to be there like when hours. And I was like, you're like nervous drinking. Fair enough. I was on the non-alcoholics that night because I was like, I don't want to like flare up on TV and look like a tomato. So I was like, no, can't deal with that. But yeah, I remember when Alessandra and Mel walked in and we're all like, what the hell is going on? Like, it was just so crazy because after the hens, obviously after the hens, we go away, you prep for your wedding. Yours was one of the first ones, right? When was your wedding?
Mine was actually the second week. So I went back to Perth for a whole week. Yeah. I flew over for the hens.
How bizarre would that have been?
Went back. Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah.
It was really weird because everyone's like, "Oh, you're going away," and I'm like, "Yeah, but only for a few days, and then I'm coming back." And they're like, "For what?" And I was like, the job interview for the job that I'm doing in Sydney, the job."
Yeah, is that the excuse you used?
I used an absolute like. I used a variety of excuses, none of which were believable.
Okay.
I remember like meeting up with an old friend of mine and being like, yeah, I have to be home by 9 though. And they were like, why? And I was like, it's a really old building and they have to like manually let you in. I'm terrible at lying. So I was like, not very good. But they were like, funny. Okay.
Well, this girl's weird.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's like, can't get into the building. So that's why I've got to be back at 9 because then security goes home to bed.
That is so funny. It's so weird that we had that 9 p.m. curfew. Like, what was that about, honestly?
And then the Saturdays it was 10 p.m. and then it got changed to 9 p.m.
Because we all broke down.
Yes, it was like...
that was a punishment.
Yes, it was right after Taylor, like, fled the country. Like, that was... I don't know how she did... I was thinking about this the other day. How did she do it? Like, is there a fire escape that we didn't know about? I
feel like I spoke to her about it and I'm pretty sure she just, like, packed everything up quietly and just left at, like, the crack of dawn. And I think because when the APs, which is the like the producers that stay on site,
adult babysitters,
we love
them.
I don't know who was on shift, but I don't think they were like in the hallway. And then she just legged it and she left.
I mean,
you guys,
respect.
Honestly,
that's a hard task
because and I'm surprised I got her back. I'm surprised I got her back on that flight back to Sydney.
I know. Oh my God. That was so wild. I remember hearing about it and everyone was like, what? How did you do that?
Honestly, because it's just like it's stuck there.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that you came, you filmed your stuff in Sydney, then you went back. And did people know you were going on the show or were you very like hush-hush about going on, and what was that dynamic?
When I first applied, because I actually applied.
Yeah,
I sat down and I did the whole thing.
Yes. I did too.
Applications we love. When I first applied, I got a call the next morning.
Same.
Yes, it was like straight away. Yeah, we want to talk to you, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I told everyone. I was like, this is the funniest thing that has ever happened to me. Like, no way this is ever going to happen. Yeah. You don't think that someone's going to read your application, let alone like actually put you on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was telling everyone, I thought it was so funny. And then I was like, you'll know if I got on because I'll have to stop talking about it. And
totally.
it's just like, I'm like updating everyone and Yeah, and then it got to the point where I was like, you can't tell anyone about the process now.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And then I had to come up with this whole thing with all my friends and my housemates to be like, yeah, they didn't choose me. I'm so devastated.
lol jokes.
Yes, yeah. And then I just made it worse for myself because I had to come up with this elaborate thing of like, well, they didn't want me, but there's also a camera crew coming around to do like a mini documentary series on people, and I'm in that, and that's why there's cameras here, not that. And then I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh yeah, you know what I did today? I picked out wedding dresses with my mom, and my housemates were like,
oh,
you liar. I was like, yeah, my bad.
So take us back to Lyndall applying for MAFS, Lyndall's dating life before that moment. What was your situation, and what kind of led you to apply and to want to kind of give it a go? Because it's really hard thinking back, because I'm like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Like, why did I do that? You know? So
what was going through my head?
What was I thinking, really?
Well, I think back when I applied, like but I had been in like a longer term relationship. I don't even think it was 18 months in total, but we ended up living together at the end. And it was with someone that I never really felt any pressure to think about with the future, like I think about the future with. And so I think that kind of lulled me into this sense of security of like, oh yeah, I don't have to think about that. We can just keep cruising how we're cruising. Sure. And I think just with COVID and the stress of COVID and me having to be isolated for most of that, and then knowing that Trikafta was coming, not knowing when it was going to be approved, but that it was there and we were fighting for it to be approved. It was like, is this how I want to live my life? Like, is this the relationship? Is this the job? Blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And I like went away for a weekend and just chilled. And then when I got back, I quit my job and I left my partner and I moved out, and I was just like, no, I need to like be ready to rebuild my life.
Yeah.
And then it actually finally got approved, like, I don't know, a month or two after that, got approved. And then as soon as it got approved, I think it was like a week later, I was like, oh my God. The first thing I said when I found out was, holy shit, I can get married. Like, and then I was like, oh, well, you know, might as well just like cut out the middleman and we'll just start with the marriage. Yeah. So, yeah. And then I was processing all of that like life change.
Yeah.
And it was almost like when I was doing the application, it was like a little bit of therapy, like really thinking
like,
about
what
I wanted.
Want?
And and like, I guess like it was fun to explore that as an idea, because it was something I never let myself think about. Yeah. But I didn't think anyone would actually read it. And then totally, because
you put so much effort into it. And like you said before, I really was able to sit back and like, okay, what do I actually want in a partner? What are the values I want? What are my deal breakers? What are the kind of points that they need to, what do they need to tick off, you know? And that was like, oh, okay. And it's like, do I tick these off for myself? Am I kind of giving myself what I need? And it was such a therapeutic session. It took me a couple of days. I don't know if it was the same for you to do the application.
It took me like a whole afternoon from like lunchtime till dinner. Like it was insane.
And it's very intense. I don't know if you guys have ever attempted to apply for MAFS, but you kind of got to take it seriously because it's a lot. You can't just make up random things.
But I also think that like the idea that no one was ever going to read it was helpful, because then I was super honest, because I was like, oh, this will just go into the abyss. Like, see you later. Yeah. It's like an ode to myself. But yeah, so then I guess when the process actually started and I stopped finding it just hilarious that they even wanted to talk to me, I was like, oh my God, like this could really happen. And then like really diving deep into that, like,
what could it be?
This is what I want. And like, I can finally want it and have it. And so I'm going to do it. And then I remember talking to my parents about it after I told them, and they were like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And I was like, oh, well, not really, but it's happening.
Why not?
But I remember saying to them that, look, at the end of the day, all I want is to go in and try and understand whoever it is. Like I was pretty much ready and willing to accept whoever it was at the end of the aisle. Like completely open book. And I also was like, well, look, it's an incredible story. It's something that's really close to my heart. And it's something that if I was younger and saw someone on TV that had CF, like that would have changed a lot for me, because I genuinely growing up felt like I was the only person like on the planet that was dealing with what I was dealing with. And so, I was like, hopefully one person out there will be like, oh, I've been through that.
It's so crazy, because even I think back and like, I don't think I knew anything about CF before I met you. And I started looking into it a lot more, and I was like, fuck, like this is like hard. And then it wasn't really like because I remember hearing about it on the Hens Night, but you didn't really cover it too much, I guess, during filming. You never had that as like, that wasn't really your personality, you know? Like that was something you experienced it, but you never made it something that was the only thing about you, you know? And I always was like, wow, like you have this and this has been your journey and it's so amazing you've got to that point. And I was like, wow, like I never knew anything about it. And it's so, I always thought that was beautiful, like having someone like you on to raise awareness for that. I feel like no one's ever going to forget about that drug. Like it's like ingrained in our heads.
I did not get paid for that.
Like, is that sponsored? I swear to God. They should, honestly. Seriously, guys, hit her up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was a really good message to send, especially feeling as if, you know, you couldn't get married and that, you know, this changed your life and it could give you that opportunity to, look into the future and what you wanted. And, you know, that obviously being marriage and that's, you know, something that you've wanted in your life. It's amazing. And I think that's great that you were able to tell that because, it's just... it was just crazy. I think back, I was like, we never really spoke too much about it during filming. It was only ever like off camera or like, it never was like a huge thing. But then when I'd watch it back, I'm like, fuck, like that's amazing. That's a beautiful. I remember tearing up when I watched that first episode. I was like, far out. Like that's just so beautiful. I think it's very inspiring to people on many levels, right? Like not just someone with CF, but being like, oh, okay, you know, I can give it a go. I can find love and I can, you know, it is out there for me if I want to look for it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Which I always thought was like a nice little extra thing that it gave to the show.
I think for me as well, it highlighted something that I logically knew but never like deeply understood, which was that I deserved that. It like always, like I didn't, 100%. I'm not now worthy of love just because I have this miracle drug. Like I was always worthy of that. And if I had ever, like if someone had ever said to someone that I loved, hey, you have this baggage or you have this burden attached to you, you don't deserve to be in a relationship. It would have been on site. Like I straight up, square up. Like
seriously.
So I think like logically I was always like, no, you know, I do deserve it, but I'm opting to not.
Yeah.
And I think like coming off the show, it was almost this realization of it's actually something that makes me so much more empathetic and so much more articulate and so much more well-rounded. And it's actually a bloody privilege to date me. Like I'm going to be real. It is. And I deeply care and I have so much to offer. And I think that that's in big part because of CF to begin with.
Yep.
So I don't know. That's what I learnt from MAFS.
I love it. And obviously we've got to talk about your husband on the show, Cam.
Yes.
Was he going back to, again, the application process and what you asked for from the experts, do you think that he was what you kind of wanted? Like on the outside, obviously not taking the experience we've had and everything we know now, but in those first kind of couple weeks, because I remember this very clearly at the Hens. Linda was like, I just want a cowboy. She, word for word, was like, I want a cowboy. And I was like, yeah, cool. And then when I saw Cam for the first time, and it's actually funny, so the first dinner party, I don't know if you remember this. So context, when you go to the dinner parties, you're put in these random marquee tents waiting to go into
the tarps.
Yeah, these random tarp tents. It's so random. You're sitting there with 2 chairs, a box of like
Sudoku.
Barely Sudoku snacks, a handball. Yeah. And I remember there's like a window. So Ollie and I were looking at the window and then we saw through and I saw Cam. And so Ollie was speaking with Cam. That's the first time I saw Cam was through the little slither of, and he was all the way at the end. And I was like, he looks like a cowboy. But I remember you saying, a couple of things that, I just remember from the Hens Night of what you would ask for and what kind of vibe you want. And I was like, that's Cam.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because I was talking about this recently that I actually think that they nailed it. Because I was I want someone that's really warm, really friendly, who loves their life, who just says yes to everything. And a little bit of a cowboy. Yeah. And that's what I got. I genuinely think I got that. And I think that, like, if I'm real, I think that's who Cam is with his friends. Yeah. And when he is in his environment, that is who he is. He's friendly, he's loyal, he's funny, he doesn't take life too seriously. He always says yes to everything. Like, I fully acknowledge that. I just think that, like, I think we had very different ideas of what loving your life meant. And
totally.
Like the care factor maybe was a little bit different for the situation because I think he he kind of went into it and said yes, right? Like I always said, like the type of person that I want to be with is the kind of person that go like looks at MAFS and go like, oh, YOLO, why not?
Yeah, totally.
And like that's what Cam did, right? But I think for me it was like I'm going to go in and take it really seriously and like really commit and like try and understand who they are. And I think Cam kind of wanted it to be a lot easier than it was.
Sure.
And I don't think he knew how structured it was going to be in terms of the rules
restrictions
and the living situation and literally having to be together all the time in a small apartment in the middle of busy Sydney.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Like
and like all of the restrictions on like when you can go out, where you can go, and that you can't hang out with anyone but your partner. And it's like, God, like I don't think I've ever dated someone that I want to only hang out with all the time. Like, yeah, it's interesting because it's obviously there was a lot that happened with Cam and I that I don't condone and that I don't like.
Of course.
But I also really spent a long time trying to accept who he was for who he was and understand why he was that way.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I can't hate the guy. Like I can disagree with his actions.
Totally.
And be hurt by them. But I don't think he's like the most terrible, awful human being on the planet, even though I still have all of that hurt attached to him.
Of course.
So, I don't know. It's been a weird reconciliation coming out.
Yeah, it's hard because I never really connected with Cam during filming. I don't know why. I feel like we just never made an effort with each other, which is whatever. But yeah, I always found at the very beginning, I got that same energy from him that he was just like this happy guy, chill guy, always gave everything a go. And then things just kind of changed a little bit, and I guess a lot of it could be attached with the production element and how the pressure of it all and spending so much time with your partner. I think all these little things can really bother you, and it's just think about you would never spend 24/7 with your partner ever in your life to the extent that we would with these people, these strangers that we've just met. And I think honestly, MAFS, if you can get through MAFS, like you're getting through at least a year in your relationship because it's really intense and it's very it puts you through a lot. And I could definitely see, like you said, like Cam struggling with that and then taking it out on you a lot.
Yeah, that's generally how I describe it. Is like his frustration was with production and the situation, but I was the person that copped that. I was the symbol of why he was there.
100%.
And so it's very like misplaced.
Yeah.
And like I can understand that. And that was something with Cam is that I could always understand where he was coming from. And I think I actually understand him a lot better than he would care to admit. Yeah. But 100%. He could never see it the other way. And so we just kept getting stuck on these really small things that I couldn't explain it to him in any other way. Like it was like I tried to get through to you and it just wasn't there. I think it was there was so much going on in like the first 30 centimeters of his face. Like he was like this everywhere he looks, it's production. Yeah. And then it's beyond that was like just hectic.
Yeah, because I found like you said, I always found the issues you guys had were quite small. Not small, but they could have been worked through, and I think he maybe saw them bigger than they were. Like let's talk about the affection thing because that's something that really bothered me, and I couldn't understand where that went wrong and why it was such an issue for him. So if you guys hadn't seen on one of the episodes, I think it was it before Homestays where you're on the phone to your mum and
it was before Family Day.
And you'd made a comment to your mum and she had said, oh, like give Lyndall a hug or something, right?
Yeah. So I was like having quite a hard time being away.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was getting quite like visibly upset. Like just talking to my mum, I was FaceTiming her. I was sitting on the floor. Cam was on the couch behind me watching the rugby, I think. And my mum was like, "Oh, Cam, could you give her a hug for me?" And he was like, and like I don't know. He was obviously watching the rugby and having a beer and doing Cam. But then my mum was like, "Oh, come on, like
it's not that big of a deal."
Yeah. And I was like, "Mum, don't worry about it. Like, please don't start a fight. I can't do this." And that as well. And then he was like, "Bah," and then I can't even remember what he said, but he was like, "Nah," and like put his beer down and like walked into the other room, which was just the bedroom behind like a couple of wooden slats. It was not another room.
It was like just the other section.
Yeah. And my mum was like, "Oh, well, I don't like him anymore." As just like a funny, like, I don't know. Yeah. As maybe a little like lighthearted, snarky comment. And he just lost it. And then he left and didn't talk to me for like a day, and I was just like far out, like and then I just felt when we were talking about it on the couch after that, it was like my mum was not trying to pressure you, and that was
No,
not the
that
situation.
wasn't it.
And I just like, and I was so worked up because it's my mum as well, right? And anything that gets said about my beautiful family, when I know her intention was just to look after me, I was like, I really don't want this to blow up and turn into something, and I don't want my mum to get villainized in any way. And so it was so like, it was almost like I was trying to tread so carefully to not misspeak and not represent her in a bad way. And like, I don't know. That really got to me because I was like, I don't know how to tell you that it wasn't that big of a deal when clearly he thinks it's this big deal, and I don't want to invalidate your feelings, and I don't want to like bring my mum into this. And it was really, I think from there it got really complex trying to talk about affection, because as well, I'm like, your body, your choice. I absolutely do not want to force anyone to be close to me. My point was more that if you're with someone and you like them as much as Cam told me he did, surely a part of you would want to be close.
And it'd be natural. It wouldn't feel something that is forced. It's something that just kind of happens.
Yeah. And as I saw, he could do that quite naturally with other people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I couldn't understand why he was so reluctant with me.
Yeah. It was almost like, I guess how I would take it is like he had this like resentment towards you because of the experiment and all the things he was dealing with internally, and it was then taken out on you, and it was almost like a protest against all of it, pushing it all away and then being like, okay, well now Lyndall's going to have to cop this because I don't want anything to do with all this like bullshit of MAFS, you know? Yeah.
I genuinely think it's like, not that he was trying to control me, but I think it was him trying to have control of the situation. Yeah. And so that was the one thing that he could control, whether he was like, no, this is the one thing that I will not do because I have to do everything else that everyone tells me to do. So right now, no. And I was like, okay.
I know. It's so like, it's really sad thinking back because there was so many beautiful moments with you both, and like where I thought you guys were just like perfect together. And I'm just trying to think of like, and I don't know if you remember a moment where it kind of went wrong, or what kind of, when things took a turn, because usually there's a bit that you're like, oh, okay, this is when it's going a bit downhill. Yeah. I think the affection was one of them when it started to be like, oh, okay, it's a bit weird that he's not. I mean, from an outsider that was there watching, I found it very bizarre that was even like an argument that you guys were having.
Right.
And then I'd be sitting there during your couch sessions, and I'm like, is this like serious? Like, is this like actually like a big problem they're having, and this is like causing such an issue in their relationship, where it's, to me, it seemed like it wasn't that big of a deal. Again, not trying to like make him feel like it wasn't a big deal, but I just felt like, oh, okay, I didn't really think that this was warranted a huge
like how did it go from that to that?
Where I felt like at the beginning it was like, it's so natural with you guys, and you guys were so flirty and such a vibe. It was just so bizarre for it to be then not, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to like pinpoint one thing, because there were quite a few, especially in the start for me, where I had to really like take a deep breath and be like, he's never done this before. Mm-hmm. And that was always what I was told. It's like, but Lyndall, he's never been in a relationship before. And I'm like,
is that true?
I don't know.
I don't really.
I feel like
as in
maybe he's never been like, boyfriend. I am someone's boyfriend.
Yeah, he's obviously dated.
I know he's dated.
Yeah, he's got to have dated, which is like, whatever those dynamics are, you would understand a dynamic of a girlfriend-boyfriend relationship, and what I guess a rough expectation would be in that, you know?
I feel like it's just one of those like, well, technically I've never been in a relationship things, and MAFS would have like eaten that up.
They would have loved that. Yeah, he's the one. We're getting him.
Yeah. I mean, there were a few moments, like I remember being on the honeymoon, and it was our last day. We were about to go on like a hike, and this never aired, and I didn't understand that because I think it like played a lot into how I approached things after that. But he said, and I know it's been put in like a tabloid, but I think they got the wording wrong, and I don't like that it went into a tabloid because I don't know. I'll just say it and then we'll talk about it. But yeah, it was our last day, and we were sitting there, and you know, our producer's like, oh, like this is your last day. Like if you've got any big questions, like now's the time.
Let's nut it out, yeah.
And I was going to ask, like, why do you think you've never been in a relationship before?
Great question.
I was like, you know, like tell me why and what you think brought you to that. But before I could, he was like, and the poor guy, like, truly has no idea how to use his words. But he was like, I'm trying not to have a dig. I'm really, like, I'm not trying to have a dig. I really am not trying to have a dig. I promise. But, like, I don't know why I should start a relationship with someone who could cuck it next week. And it made me, like, shut down at first, because I was like, that's something that I have always thought, but nobody's ever said it back.
Totally.
And I was finally at a point in my life where that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And it's like the first time I'm being questioned on it. And I was like, and I think from there it was like, true. Like that's a pretty big burden. And he's had a bad experience where he did see someone with CF pass away. But it was almost like I think if I was maybe home or like with my people, I would have come to the realization of like, nah, like that's a really poor way to think about it.
Yeah.
But at the time, I took it on as this thing of like, I should just be grateful that like he's here and that he's committing to me, and like I'm just going to take him at face value because he says that he really likes me, and like I think that kind of pushed me through a lot of the relationship, and I didn't think about that till way after it was all done to be like, wow, yeah, I really took that on as like, yes, correct. Everything I've ever thought about having CF and dating was true.
Yeah.
And then so it's hard because I don't think he was trying to have a dig. I think he genuinely like had seen someone else lose somebody.
Yeah.
And had absolutely no idea how to ask that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's, I don't know. I feel like, I guess how I would look at it is nothing is forever anyway. So I never would even bring that up as a thing. It wouldn't really cross my mind. I mean, I don't know, I guess, but that's just such a poor way to look at it going into that and not knowing, because he obviously knew you were on the drug at that point, right? Because you spoke about it on the wedding day. So
and the day before we did the honesty box, and we talked about like, we'd literally talked about like, if we were to have kids, how do we make sure they don't also have CF? Yeah. You know, like I'm going to be here. I can have kids now. It's crazy. Like we had this big discussion, and he actually like really deeply seemed to care. Like he was like, I'm just, you know, I don't know. There was a point that I saw in his Voxy where he was actually a little bit emotional after we spoke about it. And I was like, you did like me.
You did.
But yeah, that like, I think that just like put in me this thing of like, right, I just have to be grateful. And then a few weeks in, it was, and crazy twist, it was actually before Taylor came in. So like, and I never thought it was just Taylor. I thought we had so many problems.
It was just an element, a part of
it. I know
it.
that's a lot of people, like what a lot of people think, but I do not think that at all.
Yeah.
We actually had a really big fight just before Taylor came in. I remember watching the episode of the dinner party, and they were like, oh, Lyndall and Cam seem really cold. We'll explore that tomorrow. And I was like, why didn't you just show them what happened? Like,
yes.
And then everyone's like, oh, what the hell? What's going on there?
Yeah.
But we'd had this big fight because I think things were starting to get quite hard for him because we just moved into the apartments and changing that lifestyle and not being allowed to go out and getting in trouble for hanging out with the others and all that kind of stuff. And I remember like we'd had a couple of really tense conversations, maybe like arguments probably. And we had this really big fight where he got super frustrated. Yeah. And I actually snapped because I was like, why are you here? Like, what are you doing here? If you don't want this and you don't want to try, like, what are you doing here? And he like starts like banging the table being like, come on, like this is what I've been waiting for. Bring it. And I was like, huh? Yeah. And I mean, it takes a lot.
Yeah. Like, I would have been like fired up.
Yes. And like, I don't normally get to that stage. I don't know if you remember, but I remember being on the couch that week being like, I never want to argue with someone like that again.
Yes,
like,
I remember.
Ever. And I snapped and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I remember getting like really like upset. And he was like, you're not even letting me finish a sentence. And I was like, that's because I don't give a fuck what you have to say. And like, that was a point for me where I snapped. And then he like flung the chair into the wall. I don't remember if you remember seeing that, but they played it at reunion. And
no, I do.
Yeah. And it like that for me.
I forget what was shown and what wasn't, because there was so much that like the viewers didn't get to see, and it was more intense stuff, like a lot more like. And I think it's to elicit
a reaction in 100%. You, so that because then I was quite angry when I watched it back at reunion, because I watched it happen from like a third party, and I was like, oh my God, that happened. And at the time I was just like I just shut down, and he walked out, like, you know, he threw it and then he walked out saying like, this is horse shit, slammed the door. Yeah. And after that, I never picked a fight with him again. Like we had family day, and I was like trying so hard not to go there, but I was also like, you know,
if there's any time, it's now with the fam.
And we were both going home that weekend to go to different weddings. So I was like, at least I know I'm going to be like at home with my family. Yeah. So, but yeah, after that, I never picked a fight with him again. And I think that was something as well that like so many people were like, oh, I didn't like what you did at Final Vows. Because I didn't want to hear what he had to say. And I was like, it's because I tried so many times to tell him how I felt, and he would just walk away. He would just say, this is horseshit or this is fucked, and then walk out the door. And that's kind of how I justified it in myself of like, no, it's your turn. Like you have to stand there and listen.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyway, we've got on a massive tangent.
I know, right?
Yeah, it was just a lot. And so I guess in terms of like where I thought it was starting to go wrong, like that big fight was where I was like, if this is what it is, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And then we had family day and we both went away for the weekend. And when we came back together, we were both a bit more soft. We both apologized. And then we went into retreat, which was amazing. Yeah. So it was like, oh, see, we're fine. Like we can do this. It's okay.
And you both were doing great at retreat. I don't think there was any issues with you guys at retreat.
Yeah, we were like, damn, we thought we'd be the problem children. And we were. We were thriving. And like,
I feel like we were
and everyone else was blowing up.
Because how it was the retreat. So apart from obviously Alyssa and Duncan when they had their issues, it was literally Lyndall, Cam, and then Ollie and I up on the top level and we'd be like retreating in our little spots.
When I was listening to you and Alyssa talk about retreat and how you were like, like we heard the whole thing, I was like, same. Cam and I were just like,
it's just so crazy seeing what was shown at retreat or just what was shown on the show in general and what was we experienced. It's like, wait, no, did that happen? Because that's not how it happened when I was living it. Because even the little things that I found, which again, not a big deal, but little stuff, it's like, well, I went to see you and Bronte in that room. I was there too, but sorry, let me turn my phone off.
I know, but
just do not disturb, annoying. But yeah, like sorry.
Just while we're breaking. Hello.
Hi.
Can I get you both just to move your mics down a little bit?
Down?
So it's just starting to cover your faces a little. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, good.
Cute.
Thank you.
Thanks. Because at retreat when Bronte had that moment, I went to check on Bronte because
it was me and you.
Me and you. And then there
why was it us? I feel like the two of us like chased everyone.
And then, I had conversations with Bronte on camera, me and her sharing my opinions, but it made it look like you were the only one that supported Bronte and that like I just sat there being like, nothing to say, you know, like
have fun with that. Like
that it was just weird because which you kind of can't blame the viewers, right? Because they're only seeing such a different view of what actually happened. And retreat, I always find every year with MAFS is that's when they try and really top off the drama. That's when it hits the like top, right?
We thought we were kind of safe going in and we were not.
Yeah, we were like, oh no, here we go.
I think so. Like my experience of retreat, I was talking about this recently because obviously there's been so much happening with our year's cast,
totally
everywhere, and I feel like me, Bronte, and Jessie are just like over in Perth,
other
like
side of the
watching
world.
it all. Like, what's going on, guys? What's happening? But I've been listening to the other podcasts you've done and talking about retreat and things like that, and I on the first day of retreat before that night was told by production, if people are going to yell at each other, just let them yell, Lyndall. Like, don't get involved, don't mediate.
Really?
Yes, and so that is why I went and I sat away from away from the girls.
You did.
Because I was like, I can't sit there and watch people yell at each other because I think it's stupid. Like, we can all talk respectfully.
Yeah.
And so when everything went down with Bronte and Bronte was like
really upset.
Not the target, but like from sitting away when I'd been told something was going to happen and to not get involved. And then I see it play out and it's Bronte. I was like, this has been calculated like somehow by someone's been riling someone else up and blah, blah, blah. And now it's exploded. And I remember like by the end of retreat getting so frustrated. Yeah. Because then the next day I got pulled aside and it was like, Lyndall, don't do the lipstick thing. I was like, I wasn't there. I was on the other side of the room.
Claire doing the lipstick
I didn't do anything with the lipstick. And they were like, oh, okay, no, true. Okay, well, keep doing what you're doing. And I was like,
so sorry, just context of what the lipstick thing was. Because our cast had such an issue with screaming and talking over each other, which we tend to do a lot. So I think it was definitely Claire that introduced it. She had whoever's holding the lipstick is speaking. So there's actually, if you go rewatch Retreat, you'll see like Harrison holding a random lipstick or like Rupert holding a lipstick. And that is because we introduced the lipstick rule that if you had the lipstick, everyone else had to shut up and you could speak. And that is literally why. So it doesn't make any sense that they're just holding a random lipstick.
I saw so many tweets about that. They were like, why is everyone passing around a lip gloss?
So good.
I know. And I remember everyone getting in trouble for that. And then I remember the last night where, I don't know, there was like a whole Hugo and Taylor thing.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, again, hey, like, don't, get involved. Like, if people want to yell, like, you're really good at mediating, but they're adults. You don't need to baby them. And I was like, okay. So again, I was just like, right, Cam and I are going to mind our business over here. But I remember going in, we were having supper before we went to like have wines and stuff. And I'd just been pulled aside. And then I saw Claire get pulled aside and she came back and like we kind of had like this really like whisper over your shoulder so you might can't hear it situation.
Yeah.
And she'd been told, you know, like if you've got an opinion, just say it. And so she said that to me. I was like, don't give them what they want.
Yeah.
You go in there and you stay calm.
Yeah.
And she went in and she kind of tried to mediate. And I was like, I'm like actually proud of you for not giving them what they want, because I'd watched it happen 2 nights in a row where I was just like, for fuck's sake, I can't run in heels, guys. I don't want to do this anymore. Oh. And it was just yelling. And yeah, like retreat was just, it was so hard, I think, because I was witnessing it from afar, and it was just like, God, I've just got to deal with the fallout of it, because I wasn't allowed to help in any other way. And
well, I remember that, especially at the girls' night at retreat, right? And Mel and Evelyn had been pulled away, and they were obviously told to do something, and that's when they went in the bushes and
we
they
watched
came
them
back.
like trot
I was
off,
like,
and we were like,
what
are they just
doing?
leaving? Or
I was so angry. I was like, had they just left this? I was like, we have to sit here and film and give them content, and they've just fucked off. I was fuming. And they came back, and they obviously started with Bronte. I was like, oh, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
And then there was a moment where Mel was like screaming at you. And I was like, guys.
Yeah. So it was, I remember like Bronte and Mel like just like,
going
it was just noise. Like there was no like proper sentences being said. It was just noise. And then Bronte like just went, nah, I'm out. And she walked off. And as I walked off, Mel was still going. Like I think she was still finishing her sentence, but it went for a really long time. And so I turned around and I was like, Mel, stop.
Yeah.
And she was like, you don't know everything, Lyndall. You don't know everything. And I was like, okay, I don't fucking know everything then. And then I went off for Bronte. And I remember saying to her the next day, I was like, hey, babe, it's actually fine. I know I just got caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
Like, don't stress. I didn't take that personally at all.
Totally.
I could just, everyone was so hyped.
Oh, that was an intense night, that one. Like that, I feel like.
And then we got back, and then it was like, they went in. Yes. And they're like, oh, they spied on the boys. And like, Cam was fuming. He was so mad. I was like, babe, like, don't do that. And
wait, can we talk about this?
Yeah.
So I remember I was sitting down in the kitchen area, and I see him I see the 2 executive producers storming upstairs, and he's up there. Then he storms back down. He got like full abuse.
And he ripped off his microphone.
Oh, which you're not actually allowed to do that, because you can mess up
do.
these like $1,000 mics. You're not allowed to like fuck anything with the mic. You'll get in big trouble. And he was like, he was so angry.
Yes.
And I couldn't really understand why he was so angry about it, because Leighton was upset too that they were spying.
Yeah.
But also it's like they could barely, here's the thing, they could barely hear anything. Obviously, they must have heard whatever, but with how far away they were, they surely can't have heard that much.
I know.
For it to be this like big thing that the boys are pissed off about, you know?
I think for Cam, it was like he was. I'm going to be real. He was big on the bro code. Like he put the bro code before
he was
everything
so bro
else.
code. Yeah.
And I get it. Be loyal to your friends. We had like a really good girl thing.
Yeah.
But I also believe that the women were much more likely to be
reasonable.
like, it's human code. That's what Mel and I always said to each other. It's not bro code. It's not girl code. It's human code. But Cam was massive on the bro code. And that's actually where a lot of our issues came from.
Totally.
Because his mates were doing the wrong thing. And I was like, hey, maybe don't do that. But I think that was why. I think because it was like, these girls are coming in trying to like
start shit.
Get catch the guys doing the wrong thing.
And they probably
like
were doing the wrong thing. Let's be real.
Yeah. Well, they were most of the time.
Yeah, honestly. It was so bizarre watching it back, because I was like, why are they so pressed by this? And I just remember being there like, what is going on? I was over it at that point. I was like, I want to go home. Like, I can't deal with this. And that house was haunted as fuck. Seriously.
Yes, I remember this. I remember Claire like going around with the sage at one point. Yeah.
Like, it was just the worst. It was so cold as well. I was hoping to be like bikinis by the pool vibe. No, absolutely not.
None of that.
It was just not fun at all.
While we're on retreat, to give it a little positive spin, I think my favorite thing from the whole retreat was when we did the tarot cards, and it was me and Claire. I was so upset that everyone wasn't there.
I know, I missed that.
Ollie, oh my God, what a dude. We're all sitting there and he's like come up and he's like, oh yeah, you know, this is all pretty bogus, haha. And by the end, he's literally got the sage and he's like whirling around. He's like, yeah, this is so good. The boys like pulling cards and like they'll turn them over and everyone's like, whoa, that's so crazy. That's exactly how they're feeling right now.
It's so wild. And they're so amused by just like the smallest things as well. Oh my God.
The ghost from retreat.
But there's
God.
I always found Ollie so entertained by the smallest things. And he's just so, I really loved having someone like him on the show because he just added just so much. Like, although we didn't say much and we didn't really get involved too much, he just brought so much like light-hearted energy to the experiment and what we were going through. And I always just appreciated that, and having that as my person, it was like, okay, I don't have to take this too seriously. I'm like, I've got someone that's just there for me and just isn't involved. And I was, like you said with the bro code, like I'm really glad Ollie didn't get too caught up in that. And I think at times it probably he didn't love that he maybe didn't have those close connections with the boys. But I think in hindsight, they just weren't the type of guys he would usually hang around. Like, I've met all his guy friends and I love them, and none of them are like the guys we had on the show. So it just makes sense that he didn't mesh, unless it's Rupert, obviously. But it just made sense that it didn't mesh as like, you know, as smoothly. I don't know if it's a Perth thing as well. I feel like Perth guys, I mean, I'm speaking as if I'm an expert on Pertharians, but I just, is that what you say? Perth peeps?
Personality.
So Perth, I don't know, I just feel like there's a different energy.
A
different energy with Perth guys, and I just feel like it's not as, I don't know, I just got a different vibe, and his friends are just so different than like Sydney guys I know, and just, you know, against the chaos of it all.
Definitely. I actually, when Ollie came to Perth last, I went and caught up with him and met some of his friends, and I had a really good time. They were all really lovely. I won't say that about all Perth guys because, you know, it's hard out there for a girlie. But,
honestly. Well, Bronte always said that as well. She's like, I'm going on, I'm doing my location anywhere. Like,
she's like on Hinge in like Bali.
Yeah, I love that, honestly.
I mean, fair enough. She's in Bali all the time. But yeah, I mean, it was funny with Ollie because I always felt like I felt like I didn't bond with you guys at the beginning because we were always sitting at opposite ends of the table, and it was like we just were always mixing in different groups. And I think I remember like the second dinner party or something, I went over to you guys and I was like, right, all I know about these two really is that Ollie's from Perth. So I'll be like, oh, you know, whereabouts are you from? And he's like, tell me where you used to live. And I was like, oh, that's where I play hockey. And then like, even then it was like, okay, now go and sit at the table at opposite ends and don't talk and whatever.
It's so weird, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how on the show you're expected to build such like strong friendships if you follow the rules and don't do anything off camera. It's really hard to actually build those connections because you're not allowed to talk about certain things like, you know, what you do for work, kind of like stuff you would really talk about with your friends.
To bond.
You wouldn't really talk about that stuff. And two, it's just so structured. It's just not it's hard to kind of feel like to feel like you're really bonding with someone because you're like, okay, this is being filmed. Is this like, are we really connecting on this? Are we just chatting shit? Like,
and
what's
you're like,
the dynamic?
is this what they're really like, or is this just for the cameras?
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter like how much time you spend with someone. It's not until you leave that you really like know for sure who they are off camera.
Totally.
Yeah. I remember like doing the partner swap and being like, oh, I got Ollie. And I always liked Ollie, but it was always at this distance, right? I was like, I think it's going to be fine. I'm pretty sure it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And I felt like I bonded with you mostly at retreat.
Yes.
Like we had moments and stuff, but like that was where I think both of us were just like, what the fuck is happening?
Do whatever. Yeah.
And we just like side-eye each other, be like.
Yeah. We were not wanting to be a part of the drums. So that was part 1 of my chat with Lyndall. Stay tuned for part 2 where we unpack more about MAFS, from the partner swap with Ollie, talk about sexuality and what life is like after the show. Thanks so much for listening. You can follow @ChuffedPod on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.